Hi guys, today's notes are going to be a brief review on factoring. So this is the homework that we're doing after a test to prepare for chapter 7. This is going to be really important that you're solid at factoring because you'll be um, able to keep up. For this worksheet, please make sure that if you're aiming for like a C, you only have to do these 9 problems and the 9 problems here on the back, right? If you're aiming for a B, I'm asking you to do a little bit more, okay? It should be an idea of like what you're expected to know, same. And then if you're aiming for an A in this class, or you do have an A, then realistically you should be able to do all of these problems very quickly on the front and the back, even though there's a few, like you should be able to do this, okay? So there's 2 types of factoring that we're gonna review today. The first is the greatest common factor, where you divide every term by the biggest possible number for coefficient, that's the number in front, and the largest exponent possible that they have in common. You're going to factor out what you divided by and write that outside the parentheses, and what you're left with when you divide goes inside. Okay? So let's take a look. We notice that we can divide both of these by 10. I always start with the smaller number and check, is it divisible, right? So since it is, we're going to divide both of these by 10. And then the thing you want to keep in mind is that this variable right here is always going to be what you're dividing by at the end. Okay, so because there is an x here, that means this also has a single x, and so we can take out 10x as your GCF. Okay, so this one goes outside. And then what you're left with goes inside. So 20 divided by 10 is 2. I have 2 x's and I cancel 1 out, or I take 1 out, so I have an x left. 10 divided by 10 is 1. And both of these x's should always cancel out. Like that's sort of the goal here, to cancel those out. If you have the simplified form, there is no variable at the very end. Okay, so I'm going to box my answer here, and I'm done. So try all of these and see what you can divide. The only thing you want to be careful of is sometimes if you look at letter C, you can't divide by 10 here. So if you can't divide by 10, you need to pick a smaller number, such as 5 or 2, and notice these can both be divided by 2. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. I'll write it in here. Divide by 2, divide by 2, and look, this last one has an x, so we want to divide by 2x. Okay, I'll let you figure out how to write that in factored form. So let's try level B. This is level B because there's a negative in front, which changes things. So let's try these. I cannot divide both of these by 14. So let's try 14 is 2 and 7. I can't divide by 7, so I'm going to divide by 2. Now, this one doesn't have an x, so I'm not going to divide by x. However, if the sign in front is negative, that needs to match. Okay, so the GCF, the sign always matches the first term. So here it was positive 20, which is why we divided by positive 10. Here it's negative 14, so we're dividing by negative 2. So then that gives us negative 2 parentheses 7x squared minus 12. And be really careful of the signs. Positive divided by negative is a negative. Okay. Last example, just what do we do when there's bigger exponents? Well, it's the same idea. In this case, I can divide by 12. There's a negative here, right? So I'm going to divide by negative 12. And then remember, this variable needs to match here. So I can take out 2 x's. Okay. So the GCF outside is negative 12x squared to show what I divided by. And then negative 12 divided by negative 24 divided by negative 12 is positive 2. The number inside the parentheses always has to start with a positive number, which is why the negative goes outside. I have 5 x's on top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm taking 2 of them away, right? Like I'm factoring them out. So I have 3 x's left. Then positive 12 divided by negative 12 is negative 1. And remember, if I did this correctly, there should be no variables at the end. Okay, so that's your quick review of all GCF problems. Let's move move on to factoring trinomials. This is the x method, and I want you to remember that for the x method, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to c, which is the last number, and add to b, which is a number in front of x. Okay? So this is b, this is c, and over here I'm going to do a quick x method. We're going to multiply to positive 20 and add to positive 9. And this is where you pull out your purple factors paper from first semester if you need to find the two numbers that multiply to 20. And that'll be 4 times 5. And so we have x plus 4, x plus 5. We're not switching the signs here because there's no equals 0. Okay, we only switch things when we are solving and we have positives and negatives. Okay. Level B is exactly the same, except we just have to be careful of signs. So I'm multiplying to positive 42, but I need negative 13. Well, 42, we can use 6 and 7, because a positive is a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative. 7 plus 6 is positive 13, so I'm going to switch both signs to negative 13. Okay. So that'll be x minus 6, x minus 7. It does not matter if you write 6 or 7 first, because it's multiplication, right? 2 times 3 is the same as 3 times 2. This is a difference of two squares, so there's two ways to do this. Technically, we know this is c, our last number, and the b is missing because it's 0, okay, not 1. So we need two numbers that multiply to negative 100 and add to 0. And this only works when you have two numbers that are exactly the same but have opposite signs. X plus 10 and x minus 10. Some of you guys hopefully remember that this is called difference of two squares. Difference of two squares, right? And so what you can do is take the square root of 100, but remember that a square root of 100 is plus and minus, right? And the square root of x is x and x. Okay. There's one more example that I wanted to go over in terms of signs, just to be comfortable. These are positive, sorry. Okay, so this one, since this is a negative 16, you're looking for two numbers that subtract to negative 6, right? So we are going to do, let's see, 16 is 8 and 2, because 8 minus 2 is 6, but the sign of the bigger number has to match the bottom. So negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6, and then I would check negative times a positive is a negative. Okay. Your goal today is to just practice. We'll have an answer key to check tomorrow, or the next time I see you guys in class.